This is the full demonstration video on how to download and use the Strength Coaching Online free training tracker. It's completely free for you guys. I just want to help you make better progress with your training. If you haven't already downloaded it, then go to the link in the description and you'll be able to gain access there. So once you have filled out the form on my website, you'll be sent a document via an email, which will have a link in it to access the Drive folder where the training tracker is. So once you've opened that folder, you can click on the training tracker, open it up, click File, make a copy, and then you'll have your own copy of this. Now that you have your own copy, I advise that you start with the Start Here tab. This is going to be your glossary of terms and also just a reminder of anything that you may need to know with the program. So first up is all my contact details so that you can contact me if you have any questions about it. Next, we have the anatomy of the program. So I will talk through what all of these heading titles are in the program, but if you ever forget and you need to go back and remember how to use them or what you can put in what columns, then you can come back here and check on those. It's all defined and laid out for you. There's also some general spreadsheet etiquette, so try not to cut and paste anywhere because that will start to move formulas around. So if you're going to move stuff, copy and paste it, or even better, just delete it and retype it somewhere else. If you accidentally delete or overwrite a section, you can use Control-Z or Command-Z for Apple users to undo that. Now, if you go down to the list of tabs, there are a couple of extra tabs here that you do not need to access. This is where all of the background smart stuff happens. I'd advise that you don't edit those because if you do, then it won't work as it's supposed to. Now, any of the areas that you shouldn't be editing have got a protection warning on them so that if you start to edit, say if you wanted to delete this definition here, it comes up with a warning just to warn you not to delete that, and the same thing will happen on your phone. So if you see this, just press cancel because it means it's a cell that you shouldn't be editing. Now, if all else fails and you either want to start a new program or you've accidentally mixed stuff up, you can always just create another copy of this. So next we're going to go to the Program tab. So here we have weeks going across, so week 1, week 2, week 3, up to week 12, and then days 1 through to 6 going down. First column is your exercises, then sets, reps, RPEs, weights, and any notes that you need to put for those exercises for the day. Anything that is this light blue color is for you to input data into and for you to edit. Anything that is gray or any other color is something that you shouldn't be editing. So I've attached this to my exercise library so that you can go down and select exercises out of here as well. Now, one thing you can do with here is you can start to type. So say if you start to type squat, it'll come up with all the squat variations. If you start to type dumbbells or DB, which is the abbreviation I use, it'll come up with all the dumbbell exercises. Now, one of the benefits to using the exercises from the exercise library as opposed to putting in your custom exercises, which you can do, is that it will link a demonstration video for it. So once this little icon comes up here in the column, it means there's a demonstration video, and you can click that and go through to YouTube. Now, there's a mixture of my own demonstration videos that I filmed on here, as well as where I filled in the gaps with some other ones that I think are a really good example from YouTube, where I haven't got around to filming those ones yet. Now, one of the really cool features on here is it's going to be able to help you to choose weights and to select weights from week to week. So if you know your estimated 1RM or the maximum amount of weight you can do on an exercise for a single rep, then we can get some recommendations for week 1. So say dumbbell bench press, you know that the max you can do in dumbbells for 1 rep is 60 kilos. You can put that in there, and then what it's going to do is it's going to calculate out for you once we enter the protocol for this week, what the recommended weight would be. So say you're like, okay, this week I want to do 3 sets of 10 at a 8 RPE. So RPE is the rate of perceived exertion. It is inverse of reps in reserve. It's explained in the Start Here tab, but basically a 10 RPE is you have no reps in reserve at the end of the set. 9 RPE is 1 rep in reserve, 8 reps is 2 reps in reserve, and so on. I've made a few posts on RPE, and like I said, it's also explained in the Start Here tab, so I won't go on too much. Go check it out there. Once you've entered the sets, reps, and RPE, it'll say, okay, based on your max being 60 kilos, you should use somewhere between 39.5 to 41.5 kilos today. So say you decide, okay, I'm going to use 40 kilos, sits in the middle of that range. Once you put in the weight for this week, it'll give you an estimated 1RM. And once we put in the protocols for next week, so say next week we're going to go 3 sets of 10 at, now we're actually going to go for a 9 RPE, it will then calculate out the suggested weights for the following week. So it's going to say, okay, last week you you used 40 kilos. You used 40 kilos. That gave you an estimated 1RM of about 58 kilos. Based on this week from the sets, reps, and RP, we're going to use this. Now, if you decided to do more reps, say 15 reps, it's going to adjust the weight down to compensate for the number of reps. It also makes an adjustment for the number of sets. So generally people fatigue set to set. You might be able to do, one set at a certain weight, but if you're going to do 10 sets, the overall average weight between the sets is going to have to come down. So it brings it down 1% per set. So if you were going to do 10 sets of the exercise, it'll adjust that down to compensate for that. Now, another cool feature in here is that you can enter different reps and different weights and different RPEs for different sets. So say you go into the day and you're like, right, I'm going to do 3 sets of 10. And the first set you get 10, and the second set you get 10, and the last set you can only get out 9 or 8. If you put that in there, it will average it out and still give you a sensible estimated 1RM, and then therefore range for the next week. And the same thing happens with RP. So the first set was 8, 8, and then 9, whatever. And then same with weight. Say you went 40, 40, and then the reason you could only get 8 reps was you decided to go up to 42. And all you have to do is separate it with a comma, and it'll automatically average it out and track all of that for you. Now, if you enter in an exercise for week 1, it can go across and automatically fill that in for that row for all of the rest of the weeks. If later on you wanted to change your program and say you actually wanted to do competition bench here, so like barbell bench, and you decided to move your dumbbell bench down here, that is totally okay. It will follow it around and figure it out. The videos will change and the range and estimated 1RMs will reset based on that. Now, the one thing is, once you've delinked this and manually entered in a different exercise, it will then change all of the rest of the weeks following that as well. Now, if you then wanted to go back and use this for a different program, you then want to download a fresh version because we've sort of delinked the row from week 6 onwards. But this gives you heaps of flexibility to adjust it down, add a different exercise in, change the exercise or whatever. And for the estimated 1RMs, which we'll see in a minute in the dashboard, as well as the weight recommendations to actually follow around whatever row that exercise is in and still give you sensible recommendations from there. Now, at the end of each day, we have a program summary. So this is some really useful information to track so that when you design your next program and also when you're looking at changes in your performance week to week, these are the most important things I reckon that you should be looking at. So your overall duration of your program, this gives us an idea of how much kind of rest time you had cumulatively throughout everything. If the same number of sets takes longer, then we were resting more in the middle. And if, say, one session felt really easy and you're like, oh, I actually took an extra half an hour over it, maybe I should be resting a little bit longer. We have session RPE. Now, this is a scale of 1 to 10 of how hard the session was in general. So 1 being like sitting on the couch doing nothing, 10 being it was the hardest workout you've ever had, somebody had to carry you out to your car. And this is going to give you an idea of basically how hard you're finding each session. If all of your sessions start to be 10s and you're just absolutely getting beat up, then okay, maybe we need to reduce the RPEs, maybe we need to reduce the total number of sets you're doing, something in there. But this is really useful retrospectively when you look back over a block of training to see, okay, how many sets was I doing? What was the average RPE? What sort of exercises was I using? And then how hard was I finding those sessions? Early on in a block, you generally want the sessions to be a little bit easier and the sessions get harder towards the end, but it gives you an idea of how to look back and actually figure out how much training you should be doing as you go on and as you get more data from your program. There's also a space to put the date that you were doing each one, just for future reference, and then a note column to put any notes to do with the session in general that aren't to do with a particular exercise. So the next tab, and something that I think is really important that not enough people do with their own programming, but people often do if they're working with a coach, is the weekly review tab. And this is where you're going to look at the end of each week, some of the stuff to do with your life and the greater context that your training was happening in, and actually tracking those and taking those into account when you record the block, so that when you go back over the block, you can make sensible decisions based on that. Say if your training was really good or really bad one week, you can go, okay, what did I feel like my nutrition was at like that week? What was my sleep at like that week? And then we also track some things like upper body soreness, lower body soreness, joints, aches and pains, and so you can start to see some patterns and see some trends between what's working, what's not, What are you putting in? What are the outcomes you're getting out? So this weekly review form has some questionnaire rating scales that you start with. So how strong was your desire to train, above average, below average, that sort of thing. It then gives it a number. You'll see in the dashboard in a second. We'll be able to see how those track. And it's similar for all of these on a 7-point scale. And then at the end of it, there's just some space for you to put in some free text stuff. So what was a win for a week? This is really important, reflective, to actually have wins for the week and think, okay, even if it was a stellar week of training, or even if it was quite a hard week of training, what did I feel like went well? Was it that it was a hard week of training, but I actually got it done? How do you feel about your progress? How is your nutrition? And any other symptoms or context, so that when you look back over your training, you can actually see what was happening that week. Because 10, 12 weeks out, it's hard to see or remember what was going on. So what we're going to do now is we're actually going to jump over to a demo version that I have that already has a bunch of automatically generated training data in it. So don't pay any attention to what the particular exercises are or what the sets and reps and stuff are. This is just something I got Google Sheets to automatically generate so that we could have some numbers. So this is what it's probably going to look like once you've started to fill out your training, and you can see all of the estimated 1RMs, the weight recommendations, and all of the linked exercises in here. Now this is obviously all visible from the mobile version. So on the mobile version, if you open it up, you'll be able to see where you can input stuff. You can also still click on the video links. It'll show the icon up down the bottom, and then you just click on it again and it will open up to YouTube. Now, with this program data filled in, if we go to the dashboard. So what we can see here is we can see how your estimated 1RMs were tracking week to week. Now, estimated 1RMs are a really cool thing to look at, because whether you did 5 reps one week and 4 reps the next week and 3 reps the next week, rather than just tracking weight and going, well, was I actually getting stronger because the reps were just getting lower? So was it just that I could lift more weight because I was doing less reps? Estimated 1RM basically says, okay, based on how many reps you're doing, how many sets you're doing, and your RPE, what would your theoretical max be for that day if you'd maxed out? And so it kind of gives us this standardized value that we can compare week to week, regardless of what the exact protocol was for the week for that exercise. So here in green is highlighted values that are much lower than average for that exercise. And here in red are values that are much higher than average for that exercise. Now with all of the stuff in this dashboard, you can turn it on or off. So when you're using the program normally, it's best to come up to the top and just turn the whole thing off. And that way it's not constantly calculating in the background and it won't slow everything down. So turning that back on, you can also turn off these individual sections, and then you can turn on and off exercises, add in some more here if you want to look at a few things. Normally you pick a couple of exercises that you're going to track. There's kind of a smaller version of the graphs for each thing here, as well as percentage changes. So we can see between the best week and the worst week, there was a 7% change, which is pretty good and pretty realistic actually, for somebody who's newer over a training block. We can also see what week the max was. So the 12th week was the best week for that exercise. The 10th week was the best week for this exercise. 4th week was actually the best week for this exercise, as well as standard deviation. If you know any stats, that's basically how varied the performance was. So if we see a big increase, we'll see a big variation, averages, maximums, all that sort of good stuff. And then over here, a bit of a prettier version that will be a little bit easier to visualize as well. So coming down here, we're looking at some of those other metrics that aren't your exact training output. So your session RPEs averaged across the week. So this averages each week, session 1, 2, 3, however many sessions you're doing, and then tracks it across all the weeks, as well as those first questions in your weekly review that each get assigned sort of a number value on a scale. So I just filled out the first 2 weeks worth so you could see how this was going to track as well. So you can see here, say for instance, if leg extension had a really good weekend from sort of week 4 onwards, we might track down and go, hey, actually our sleep was considerably better from that week onwards, and that sort of thing. And this is where we can start to look at trends, and you can actually start to use your training data rather than just finishing a block and going, what should I do next? I don't know, and then just going blindly into the next training block. Now, if you've seen any of my posts on how to construct a program, on training volume, or if you've gone through my ebook, The Fundamental Principles of Strength Training, which is also free, and you also will have received in the email when you applied for this, then you'll be interested in how many sets per body part you're doing, especially for hypertrophy training. So here we can see exactly how many sets that we're doing per each individual body part. Now this only works if you use exercises from my library, because they're all coded to what body parts they include for their main movers. So here I've got it for all of the main muscle groups. Now, as I said, the specific data from this program is not indicative of something you should be doing. We've got like 50 sets of chest and then not enough of some other things. But it gives you an idea when you write the program. Sometimes you write it out and then you're like, crap, I've actually got, twice as much volume on this this body part, and I've got basically nothing on this. So this gives you an idea, an overview of what the program you've written actually looks like when you break it down into its constituent parts. So each of these has a little slot that you can open up, and you can change what that row is doing. So here I haven't selected any muscle group, so this is just the total number of sets per week. We can also, instead of looking at muscle groups, you can look at pull exercises versus push exercises, and as well as upper and lower. And then you don't even have to look at sets. We can look at the weight you were using, you can look at the number of reps you were using, you can look at the sum of reps across whatever category, or you can look at the average. So say if we said, okay, what is the average RPE for all of my push exercises, and we can look at that. Most of the time, the most useful thing for you, especially if you're newer to programming, is going to be to just look at the number of sets you're doing to make sure you've got enough work per body part. But if you're interested in any of these other metrics, it's just drop down stuff, and you can look at anything from any aspect from your program, and it averaged out over whatever categories and stuff you were using. Now, these muscle group categories is what I personally categorize as, when I pick an exercise, say like split squats, I've said, okay, this is both a glute exercise and a quad exercise, because although depending on how you do it, say quads are the primary mover and glutes are the secondary mover, as far as which one is moving the most load during the exercise, it is significant training for them both. Now, in a split squat, your calf is actually somewhat active as well, but as far as I'm concerned, it's not enough to be considered a training set for your calf. So this may change depending on how different people define these sorts of things. So just take that into account. These numbers, when you pull them out by exercise, are based on how I considered and classify each exercise. So over here too, if we get rid of the total number of sets, we can see how the total number of the sets were split up per body part. So we've got 30% of our sets currently at chest. So just some quick ways to visualize that as well as a sort of a cumulative graph here. Now, a couple of final notes on using this. When you're using it on your phone, it's best to save it to offline. So if you go onto your phone, you'll be able to click on the 3 dots at the top of the spreadsheet and then go make available offline. This means if you're at the gym and you lose internet, you're still able to use the sheet, and it'll just update when you get internet access again. The other thing is, when you're putting in your exercises, it's important that each exercise has a unique name. As you can imagine, otherwise, if you have 2 high bar squats and then you try and pull them up in the dashboard, it's like, okay, well, which one are we pulling up? So say if you did want to do high bar squats twice in 1 week, or you wanted to have 2 different protocols in the same day, you'd have one of them called high bar squats, and then the other one put in high bar squats .1 or .2 or something. So as long as you put the full stop in there, it'll just recognize that it's a different slot of the same exercise. Whatever you put after the full stop doesn't really matter. So I hope you have found this useful. I hope that this helps you make the most of your training. If you're at all interested in working with me as a coach in the future, then start tracking your training in this now, and then we'll have all of that training data to go with when we start for your first block together. If you have any issues or questions or requests with this, feel free to contact me either by email or by social media. I will be releasing updates for this at some point in the future. So if there's something that you would like in here, a feature that's not currently in here, let me know and we'll see what we can do. So go have fun with this and go make some gains.